शान्तिरन्तरिक्षगं शान्तिर् द्यौः शान्तिर् दिशः शान्तिरवान्तर दिशा शान्तिरग्निः शान्तिर् वायुः शान्तिरादित्यः शान्तिश्चन्द्रमा शान्तिर् नक्षत्राणि शान्तिरापः शान्तिरोषधयः शान्तिर्वनस्पतयः शान्तिर्गौः शान्तिरजा शान्तिरश्वः शान्तिः पुरुषः शान्तिर्ब्रह्म शान्तिर्ब्राह्मणः शान्तिः शान्तिरेव शान्तिः शान्तिर्मे अस्तु शान्तिः. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om.
On page 49 of your book.
Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayethi Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Our subject today is understanding Kali. Day after tomorrow, that's on the 10th, we celebrate Kali Puja, the worship of Kali. And since we have been celebrating it for quite a number of years, I thought it might be a good occasion to reflect a little bit on who Kali is, what Kali could mean to devotees of God. In the Ramakrishna's tradition, in the Vedanta as we have understood in the light of Ramakrishna, Kali plays a very important role. For one thing, Kali is the chosen deity, the Ishta. When Ramakrishna was initiated, he was given a Kali mantra by his guru. And we know, those of us who have studied his life, how central a figure Kali was in his life. And therefore, those of us whose lives have been touched and inspired by Ramakrishna's association with Kali, Kali is important as well. After Sri Ramakrishna's passing, we read in his life that Holy Mother Sharada Devi, her first reaction to him was, after his passing, when she just cried out saying, "Oh Mother Kali, why have you left me and gone?" And so this is one of the several instances we see how the various contemporaries of Ramakrishna looked upon him. We also know from Ramakrishna's life that he worshipped Sharada Devi on a Kali Puja night. It was the Kali Puja that occurs sometime in the month of May. It's called the Falaharini Kali Puja. He worshipped Sharada Devi as a living embodiment of the Divine Mother, Kali. In a letter to Mary Hale in Chicago, when Swamiji was on the West Coast, in the year 1900, he wrote a letter to, as many of you are aware, the Hale family in Chicago. Swamiji had almost become part of their family, and he looked upon Mary and her sister and her two cousins as his own sisters. So there's many letters in Swamiji's complete works addressed to Mary Hale. And in one of the letters, this is what Swami Vivekananda wrote to her. Kali worship is not a necessary step in any religion. The Upanishads teach us all there is of religion. Kali worship is my special fad. You never heard me preach it or read of my preaching it in India. I only preach what is good for universal humanity. If there is any curious method which applies entirely to me, I keep it a secret and there it ends. I must not explain to you what Kali worship is, as I never taught it to anybody. So that's one thing I think right away for us to know, that Kali worship, or even Kali herself, is not an absolute need for everyone. So we can be just fine without Kali in our life. And yet we see that she was an important figure. And because she was important in the life of Ramakrishna and others, she is of interest to many of us. Secondly, the point that Vivekananda makes is that the reason he did not speak a lot about Kali was for precisely this, because he didn't feel it was absolutely necessary for everyone. And he calls it his own special fad. And therefore he said he's not going to describe to anyone or teach anyone what Kali worship is, and I'm not attempting to do that either. I'm just reflecting along with you all about how and why Kali became such a central figure in their lives, and whether she might have some significance or meaning in our own lives. We also read in Swami Vivekananda's life his own resistance to accepting Kali. We know the way in which he, as a young man, he was only 18 years old when he came to Dakshineshwar. And he was immediately attracted by the purity of this saint that he met, Ramakrishna. He could see that he was a completely God-intoxicated soul. What he couldn't figure out, what he couldn't understand, what he couldn't accept was why is he so all the time talking about Kali, immersed in Kali, having visions about Kali. Once in one place, Vivekananda says when during his early visits, he thought Ramakrishna was a brain-sick baby, very pure. There's no tinge of worldliness in him. And yet, he's seeing all these visions of Mother. And as a young man, this Narendranath absolutely had no idea what he was seeing. And then, years later, he said this to his Irish disciple, Margaret Noble, who became later known as Sister Nivedita. And this is what he told her. He said, "How I used to hate Kali and all her ways. That was the ground of my 6 years' fight with his master, Ramakrishna, that I would not accept her. But I had to accept her at last. Ramakrishna Paramhamsa dedicated me to her, and now I believe that she guides me in everything I do and does with me what she will. Yet I fought so long. I loved him, you see, and that was what held me. I saw his marvelous purity. I felt his wonderful love. His greatness had not dawned on me then. All that came afterwards when I had given in. At that time," well, here is where it comes. "At that time, I thought him a brain-sick baby, always seeing visions and the rest. I hated it. And then I too had to accept her." Now, again, let me just continue what he's saying. No, the thing, it seems, seeing this thing as it is recorded in books, Nivedita probably asked him, "Well, if you hated her so much, how did you then accept her?" And then Vivekananda said, "No, the thing that made me do it is a secret that will die with me." So it's not a secret that I'm about to reveal now. "I had great misfortune at the time. It was an opportunity. She made a slave of me. Those were the very words, a slave of you. And Ramakrishna made me over to her. Strange. He lived only 2 years after doing that, and most of the time he was suffering. Not more than 6 months did he keep his own health and brightness." And then he continues by saying, "The future, you say, will call Ramakrishna an incarnation of Kali? Yes, I think there is no doubt that she worked up the body of Ramakrishna for her own ends." Once Vivekananda said after he returned to India, he had these 2 visits, prolonged visits to the West. And when he was back in India, he once told a disciple that, he said, "Throughout my stay in the West, I always felt that the Divine Mother was holding me by the hand and telling me exactly what to do." And it's only these stray comments that he makes to some close disciples that we get to see the deep inner life of Vivekananda. Most of us are so impressed, so captivated, so inspired by his lectures and writings that oftentimes we don't realize that the power that came through his words came from that deep inner realization. And it's only these These are such few occasions that it's very easy to miss it. And it's so gripping. He says, throughout my stay, I always felt that the mother was holding me by the hand. And then he continues saying, Vivekananda's words again, you see, I cannot but believe that there is somewhere a great power that thinks of herself as feminine and called Kali and Mother. And then he says, and I believe in Brahman too. But is it not always like that? Is it not the multitude of cells in the body that make up the personality, the many brain centers, not the one that produce consciousness? Unity in complexity. Just so. And why should it be so different with Brahman? It is Brahman, it is the one, and yet, it is the gods too. Ramakrishna often used to say, and we find that in his conversation, that we find him in fact using the word Kali more often than Brahman. And in the Vedanta talk, we just keep on saying Brahman probably or Atman more often than Kali. And what Ramakrishna said was this, that which everyone calls Brahman, I call Kali. So it's just that we are speaking about the same reality, the same divine being, but we're just approaching it from slightly different angles. Once Nivedita was having this conversation about Kali worship with Nivedita, and when Nivedita asked him, perhaps Swamiji, Kali is the vision of Shiva. Is she? We see in that the popular image of Kali. Kali is standing atop and Shiva is lying prostrate under her feet. And so Nivedita asks Swamiji, is Kali the vision of Shiva? And Swamiji says, well, express it in your own way, express it in your own way. So again, Swamiji refuses to say what is his idea about Kali, but he encourages Nivedita. She was a great devotee of Kali herself. In fact, her little book, if you haven't read it, I would strongly encourage you to read it. It's called Kali the Mother. It's a profound meditation on Kali of Nivedita. And then when she expressed it this way, Swamiji says, express it in your own way. And so what we will try to do in the next few minutes is try to express it in our own way. Just as Swamiji asked Nivedita to express her understanding of Kali in her own way, let us together try to express our understanding. Well, I will express my understanding in the next few minutes, and then later on when we go up there, then I'll encourage you to express your understanding of her. Now, Kali appears in many ancient texts. According to some thinkers, one of the earliest references we find to Kali is sometime in 4th or 5th century of the Common Era. Her most well-known appearance is in the book called Durga Saptashati, also known as Devi. In our bookstore we have the book, it's titled Devi Mahatmyam. It's also called Chandi. So the same text has many different names. So Kali appears in it in the 3rd episode, in which Durga, the goddess, defeats the demon Shumbha and Nishumbha. Now Kali appears twice in that chapter. First, when two of the demons named Chanda and Munda, they are the generals of the Shumbha and Nishumbha, they come and they attack Durga. And Durga gets so angry, she's so furious that we read in the text that her face becomes dark as ink. And it is then that Kali springs from her forehead. And then her appearance is just as you see in many of the popular pictures about Kali. She's with this long hair, angry, bloodshot eyes. She's got a sword in her hand. It's very fierce, very, very fierce. And then she comes out, and then she just roars loudly and tears these demons apart. and then just crushes them with her jaws. Then you say in one stroke with her sword, she just decapitates both of them. It's pretty gruesome. Yeah, Kali and anything about Kali is not for the weak-hearted. If you have a weak heart, don't go anywhere near Kali. But if you are strong, if you're not afraid, then there is a lot that you can see, digest, learn, and become strong from. Now, the second time that Kali appears in that same episode is when a demon named Raktabija attacks Durga. Now, this Raktabija is a very special kind of demon. And many of these demons everyone had some kind of a special power. So this Raktabija, literally translated, Rakta is blood, Bija means drop. So if you literally translate the name of the demon, it means drops of blood. And his power was that whenever any blood came from his body, every drop of his blood could produce a clone, a duplicate of that demon. And so when he attacked Durga, and Durga had this fierce band of her fighters, and they are called Matrikas. And so Durga and her attendants, they fought valiantly with this demon, and they wounded him very seriously. And as this demon lay on ground with all wounds and blood flowing out, with every drop of his blood, a Raktabija clone came. Soon the whole battlefield was filled with all these duplicates of this Raktabija. It is then that Kali was summoned. And then she just comes and she just sucks the blood from the whole body of this Raktabija. And just all these duplicates, which are all everywhere, she just kind of puts them all in her jaw and just finishes him off. So no more blood, no more duplicates. That's the end of the story. In both these instances, we see that Kali, as it is represented in the text, is the personified anger and fury of the goddess. We find Kali playing a similar role in other texts, other mythological texts. We find her doing it for the Divine Mother, as in Parvati, when she destroys a demon named Daruka. Interestingly, we find Kali even in the Ramayana. When after slaying Ravana, when Rama was returning to Ayodhya, we read that there's one fierce demon appeared on the way. And he was so fierce, even Rama just became standstill. He couldn't react, couldn't do anything. And it is then from Sita's body, this Kali emerges and just slays that demon. Everywhere you see that the feminine as the source of energy or the power, which removes all obstacles from the path. And as we have seen, that this kind of descriptions of Kali that appear in the texts and her appearance, they just match together. But it's not just for violence and for killing that Kali is known. While there are many different the ways Kali gets expressed, oftentimes the 4 hands that she has, well, 2 hands has those. One hand has a decapitated head, and the other has a sword. But the 2 other hands have what in Sanskrit is called Vara and Abhaya. With one hand, she blesses. The blessing is called Varadana, giving a blessing. And Abhaya means she gives freedom from fear. So while those who are wicked, those who have done some terrible, they have a lot to fear from Kali. And as we see, it's not that she just killed these demons of the past. She'll continue to kill the demons of the present too. And therefore, those who have demon-like tendencies inside had better be afraid of that sword. But on the other hand, those of us who are trying our best to lead an honest life, who are striving, we may not always succeed, but we are making an effort to think of God, to do the right thing, to do the good thing. To such people, Kali appears as a mother who protects. If she destroys anything, she's the mother that destroys ignorance. She's the mother that eliminates all obstacles from the path. She's the mother who brings death to death. And therefore, as Vivekananda's quote that we saw earlier, the challenge is, how can we see the mother in this very fierce-looking personality? Because the iconography of Kali is not exactly very motherly in nature. And the reason it's not easy to see mother right away in the Kali's very gruesome image in some way is because our eyes have not become clear yet. And so one of the ways, as I've often mentioned on earlier occasions, when devotees of God meet each other, or even often monks meet each other, especially in the northern part of India, one of the way they greet each other is by asking, "Darshan saaf hai" in Hindi, which really means, "Are you able to see clearly?" Now, they're not just asking about the physical eyes, although it's good to have, as far as possible, eyes which are in working condition. But it's more in a spiritual sense that, am I able to see things clearly means, can I go beyond these external layers and almost like X-ray can go in and see things? Can I have some kind of a spiritual X-ray and then look within? And if we can penetrate these external layers and coverings, what lies hidden inside may be revealed to us. And that is exactly what happens in the Kali image. If we can develop that clarity of mind, that refinement of the mind, and if we look at Kali, we suddenly see there in that same image a very loving, blissful mother, the way Ramakrishna saw her. There is a story in the Vedantic tradition of a saint. Well, it's actually a very, very inspiring story. This is a young boy. His name was Prahlada. And his father, he wasn't born in a very, he didn't have a very great spiritual lineage, if you say biologically. His father was a demon, was a very wicked man. His name was Hiranyakashipu, who just hated God, just didn't believe in God. In fact, he thought he was God. And so we see that this son of his, who's right from birth, he has been so devoted, always praying to Vishnu. One of the ways the divine is expressed in the Indian subcontinent. And so he was just devotee of Vishnu, and his father was so annoyed that this boy, not recognizing that I am God, just worshipping this. And so we have lots of stories about how this father tried to put obstacles in his path and tried to take his mind away from God, but couldn't succeed. And then there is this one very dramatic incident in their life. And one day this father was so annoyed with his son, and he said, "Why do you keep saying God is everywhere?" And then he just pointed out, "Is your God in this pillar?" And then the son said, "Yes." And this father, just to spite his son, he just goes and kicks that pillar and says, "Okay, here is I kick the God who is within it." And as soon as he did that, and then we read, then that this pillar just burst open. From inside, a very fierce form of the divine appeared. And that is the form called Narasimha, literally translated man-lion. So here is this appearance of a half body of a lion and half a human body. And so this creature comes and just tears apart. Again, not in any way less gruesome than the way Kali would have done. And then we read, after having finished off that demon, this Narasimha, he just took this little baby Prahlada in his lap, and then just as a mother would take care of the baby with great affection, just nourishes and takes care of this baby. And this little boy is not frightened. I mean, any of us would be frightened if some such a vision were to come. We read in the, as we were reading recently in the Gita class in Wednesdays, in the 11th chapter, when Krishna bestowed this great cosmic vision to Arjuna, the vision that Arjuna saw, that is described in the 11th chapter of the Gita, is not a very benign aspect of the divine. It's pretty fierce as well. You can see almost like Kali appearing behind. And Arjuna was terrified. And here we see, Arjuna wasn't ready. If he were ready, he probably wouldn't have been terrified. And that's why you find him saying, no, please withdraw that vision. But here, this young devotee, Prahlada, he was completely ready. He wasn't frightened at all. We see a similar, and that's why we see how in Ramakrishna saw in the same Kali, he was able to see the Divine Mother. Her appearance and her weapons do not instill fear in the mind of a child. On the contrary, seeing that, a child feels completely protected, that here is this strong, when you have a kind of a strong parental figure in your life, and then you feel secure, you know that no danger can come to me because I have this great protection around me. The image of Kali standing atop Shiva, there are several stories of how did this image evolve, how did it come about. And in several versions of the story, we see that after Kali demolished and killed and all these demons, she's so ecstatic with this victory that she just starts dancing wildly after this. It's a kind of a dance of victory. And you have all these corpses of demons fallen everywhere, and Kali is doing her mad dance. There are several songs in Bengal, because it's in Bengal province in India that Kali worship really took very strong roots. And you have amazing songs. There was a great poet saint named Ram Prasad, and there's another one called Kamalakanta, who really wrote hundreds of songs to address to Kali. And you can see them describing the mad, wild dance of Kali, and all of it is just so much filled with love. And you can see the apparent incongruence that one might feel. At one hand, you are saying about this, the wild dance, the killing, and then in the same breath, in the same sentence often, you see this blissful, kind, loving mother. All the contradictions seem to go beyond these apparently contradictory qualities that we might not be able to associate right away in our minds. And so here is this Kali dancing her wild dance after killing of demons. It was so wild, it was so furious, it was so powerful that the entire universe would have been destroyed as a result of that shaking and the equilibrium. And then everyone goes to Shiva and says, please do something, just calm her down. And then one version says what Shiva does is he just goes and lies prostrate among all these thousands of dead bodies of all these demons. Shiva just goes and just lies among them. And Kali is dancing her mad dance, and then suddenly she just looks down and she finds she's already stepping on Shiva, her husband. And then that's why you have this popularity. She just kind of, sometimes you just kind of take out your tongue. It's like, oh my God, I didn't expect him to be here. And so one of the ways her tongue lolling out is shown as just a much of surprise and just embarrassment. And then that suddenly calms her down. And in another version, we read that Shiva takes the form of a child, a little child. And so as this Kali is dancing her mad dance, and then this little baby just lying amongst all these killing and carnage. And as soon as Kali sees the little baby, she immediately calms down. And then he just picks up the baby and then nourishes her, suckles her to her breast, and then everything calms down. What we learn from many of these, there are really, such a fascinating story and fascinating images and imagery at Kali, that if it's interests you, please find there's a lot of literature around. But read some authentic books, because there is a lot of trash also around about Kali. So just go to some authentic sources to get the correct idea what that Kali image means. One of the ways we can understand this, our Shiva becoming just lying prostrate at our feet or becoming a baby, is that in order for us to calm down these demons within our own heart, in order for us to acquire this clarity, in order to see that behind all the violence, behind all the carnage, behind all the contradictions that we see in life, there is this divine mother, the blissful, loving mother, the presence of the mother. We need to either become like a corpse-like, as it's sometimes said, unless we die to the world, we cannot begin to live in the presence of God. Now, dying to the world doesn't mean physically dying. What it means is, what do we understand? How do we understand death? Well, we'll probably understand it best when we die ourselves. But at least right now, how do we think about death? And one way of understanding death is, well, when a person dies, that person doesn't react to whatever is happening around him or her. That person, is not affected and doesn't react. And it's possible that even when we are living, if we can live in such a way that whatever craziness might be going around us, can we not just live a very life just only reacting to everything? Instead of reacting, can we just reflect that there are things happening around us? Some are wonderful, some are terrible. There is love, there is hatred. There is all kinds of things we see around. And if our entire life is just reacting to things, and the reaction could be both. It would be like, oh, I'm so happy. Oh, I'm so depressed. If all our life is just kind of going back and forth, shuttling happiness and sorrow, and then one day die, that's it. So instead of just reacting to things, can we just reflect and stopping this constant reaction and just spending time in reflection would bring that kind of calmness to us. When that happens, then we begin to see that this great divine power working in this universe. And if that power appears to us like a mother, that's fine. The power doesn't necessarily have to appear to us as a mother. As Vivekananda said, everyone doesn't need to have Kali in their mental life. That's not absolutely necessary. But what is very helpful is to recognize that our own existence is just filled with something is going on, some big power is at work, but we wouldn't know it. We wouldn't even get a glimpse of it if we just lead a very reactive life. At some point, we just need to just be. And that just being really means dying to the world. That just being means beginning to live in God. You cannot, and that's what Jesus meant when he said, when you cannot serve God and mammon at the same time. I cannot be alive to the world and alive to God at the same time. In some sense, the world has to go behind. It's almost like, say, you have two windows open while you're working on your computer. Whichever window is active, that will be in front. The other window may not disappear, but you really cannot do much with it. You cannot. It's in front. So when you are alive in God, that doesn't necessarily mean that the world is going to disappear. But what it would mean is that God becomes more real, more relevant, and everything else becomes a little bit less real. And then, after having dwelt in, tasted that reality of the divine, and through the divine then, when we look at the world, then the world will change for us. The same world which appears as just filled with craziness or filled with whichever way we see the world, after having touched the feet of God, as they say in devotional language, or as after having had a taste of the divine, when we look at the same world again, it will change for us. And that is why, apparently, people like Ramakrishna and you and I, we apparently are living in the same world. And yet, when he saw the world, he could just say, it is just the blissful Divine Mother. And we don't see the Divine Mother. And we are living in the same world. And the reason is that he was seeing the world through that reality, having touched that reality. And we are yet to touch that reality. So that is one way. Either we stop reacting and just use every opportunity that we have in life to reflect deeply, to understand, to learn. And then we will see the power that is working behind the world. A second way is that second story that we see when Shiva became like a little baby. And then immediately all the craziness stopped, and Kali picks him up and then nourishes him just like a mother would to a baby. And that is what Ramakrishna said. He called it Santana Bhava, that among the various ways we can relate to the divine being. And there are many different ways to do it. There is not just one way to do it. But one of the ways to do it is to see oneself as a child. And that was the relationship that consistently Ramakrishna maintained all through his life. He saw himself as a child of the Divine Mother. So these are the two insights that come to us. In order for us to recognize this great power working behind this whole universe, we either need to use the opportunities to reflect rather than to react, and these are not mutually exclusive. We can do both and also become a true child. The moment and what are children known for? I mean, who do we say childlike? Being childish is different from being childlike. So not that obviously we have to grow, we have to become adults. We can't act in a childish way. But it's possible to be very childlike. That innocence, that spontaneity, that purity that we associate with childhood. We all were like that at one time, don't forget. Somehow, as we grew up and ate of the tree of good and evil, if you like, we apparently became more knowledgeable, but we also seem to have lost that innocence and purity of childhood. And spiritual life is nothing but trying to regain what we seem to have lost. It's almost like becoming a child again. So just to conclude, what we see in the image of Kali is both the Kali standing atop Shiva. The Shiva below stands for this infinite reality, which doesn't do anything, which just is. Sat. So Sat Chit Ananda. So Sat means just being, existing. And that's what Shiva stands for. And this Kali, who is this dancing on top, is really the dynamic aspect of the divine, the immanent aspect of the divine. And so all the power, all the energy that makes creation, all movement possible, is this power of the divine. And while it's possible to speak about God and God's power, divine and divine power separately, you cannot really distinguish them. You can distinguish them, but you cannot separate them. And so while we can speak about God and Shakti, as Ramakrishna said, the two are inseparable. They are like, and he used to give different examples. He said there is just like milk and its whiteness. Try separating milk from its whiteness. And he says, and so on. Well, there are many examples. We need not go into them. But the idea is that God and God's power cannot be separated. And in some ways, it's God's power that makes this dynamic creation possible. So all of these things can be kept in mind as we get ready for the worship of Kali day after tomorrow. When our eyes become clear, then when we, with that clarified vision, when we look at Kali again, and then suddenly we're able to see the deeper significance of the image of Kali. And then suddenly we discover that this garland of heads around her, and then we, if it's a fairly big image and accurately done, you might discover that there are actually 50, exactly 50 heads around her. And those 50 heads stand for the 50 letters of the alphabet. So in the Sanskrit alphabet, and there are 50 letters. And each of those letters stands for a distinct sound that the human voice box is capable of making. And there's no time for it, but it's good to know that what we speak about logos, in the beginning was the word was with God, the word was God. So a similar thing occurs in the study of Kali as well, that the sound and the word and the creation, how they all originate from this divine being. The heads are also seen, the decapitated head in her hand, the head is seen as a symbol for ego. And so the decapitated head in Kali's hand stands for with her grace, she is capable of removing the egoism from our heart, because it is the egoism that separates us from the divine. And that sword removes all the bondages, all the ignorance and everything. So depending on where we are coming from, the same image can cast us fear, loathing, or just confusion. And as the eyes become clear, we are able to see a deeper layer of meaning. Suddenly the whole image becomes more meaningful, more powerful. Vivekananda once said that the image of Kali is the most complete imagery of the divine as we can conceive of it. He said that because oftentimes our concept of God tends to be one-sided. We like to say that everything came from God, and yet the God that we visualize, the God that we conceptualize is often associated with the benign, the loving, the kind, everything is just fine. The problem with that is that the world in which we live has those things, but it also has many other things. There is killing, there is violence, there is blood, there are lots of things which it might be difficult to figure out, and that's why we just keep on asking, why did God allow this to happen? And so these kind of questions come. And what the Kali imagery shows, that all this, the world in which we live, it's all the good and the bad, the life and death, the source of all of this is one. There's one rather puzzling and frightening to some extent, a vision that Ramakrishna had, and I will just mention that before concluding. He said, Ramakrishna had one mystic vision, that he says once he saw from a river a woman, a very beautiful woman, emerge from a river. And she was in a later stage of pregnancy. She was about to give birth to a baby. So she comes out, emerges from the river, she comes on the bank, she gives birth to a baby. After the baby is born, she nourishes the baby, suckles her to her breast, loves her affectionately, does everything that a mother would do to a baby. And then her appearance changes. She becomes this fierce mother, and she just kind of gobbles up that baby. And then she walks back into that river and disappears. But that was a mystic vision. And as all mystic visions are, they're very highly symbolical. But it's pretty
fearsome for us because it just demolishes our sense of propriety. What this shows is this: if everything is really one, if everything is come from that one source, then that one source is really the mother. And so the baby is a part of the mother's body. But also, the mother has to live in order for the baby to survive. In order for the mother to nourish the baby, the mother has to eat food. What is the mother going to eat when there is nothing else apart from the mother? If there is only thing is one, if everything is her creation, and if this mother has to survive, she has to eat from her own creation. And so however terrible it might sound, both birth and death, everything subsists in that one reality. The moment you try to separate out or fracture or divide that reality between good and bad and associate the divine only with the good, then you have the problem with this evil. And then you have to invent a devil for it, because then you can't say, well, God had nothing to do with it, then there has to be someone else to deal with it. What Kali's image does, it brings us back to the idea of oneness. That so long as our eyes are not clear, we are going to live in these dualities. This is going to appear very contradictory. There are things that ennoble us, and there are things that revile us. There are things that inspire us, and there are things that are terrible. And if we have to find a way to stop this polarizing, contradictory nature of life, then it will not do to cling to only one side of it, because then you're constantly at fight with the other side. The goal is to transcend both. That doesn't mean good is not good. We all must be good. We all must eliminate evil. So that doesn't mean that, well, all are same, so evil is good is good. That's not what I'm saying. Sure, we have to kill the demons in our lives. Just like Kali killed all the demons, we have to kill the demons, inner and outer, but the inner are more important. If we just try to kill the outer demons, keeping the inner demons alive, problem is not going to be solved. But killing these demons, we have to see that ultimately that reality is beyond both good and bad. So we must become good, eliminate evil from our heart, and then transcend that goodness. Because holding on at that point, clinging to good will be a bondage. The example that is given in Vedanta is, if you are bound, does it make too much difference? If you are tied with a chain, would it make too much difference to you if that chain were a gold chain or a rusted iron chain? If you're tied, well, you would rather be free rather than saying, oh, please give me a gold chain. I would rather be. It really wouldn't make any difference. Exactly in the same way, good and evil are not same. They are different. We need to crush evil. We need to eliminate evil. We all need to become good. The question is, what do we do after becoming good? It is at that point that we realize that goodness itself is holding on to just one polarizing aspect of reality. And we need to go beyond both. That is the time we realize that the divine transcends both good and bad. And that is what the Kali's image shows. Both life and death, all are present in this relative realm. When our eyes become clear, that which appears to be fierce becomes very motherly. So all that we need to do is to make our eyes more and more clear. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhu. We bow down to Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. So on Tuesday evening, day after tomorrow, that's on 10th,
we will have Kali Puja. And so all of you are welcome. The puja is held in the evening, so please try to be here. Puja will start around 6:30 and may go around up to 9 o'clock or 9:30. So prepare yourselves accordingly. Yesterday someone called me asking whether fasting is necessary. It's not absolutely necessary as it is done at the time of Shivaratri. So if you want to fast, you're welcome. But even if you don't fast, that's fine too. What we normally do is Shivaratri, which comes generally in February or March every year. That is the tradition then to fast on that day. So Kali Puja on Tuesday. On Wednesday, we will have the Gita study as usual at 7:30. And on Saturday, we'll have the Arati and meditation as usual also. Next Sunday, for next Satsang, our topic will be learning how to learn Vedanta. Many of you might say we have been coming here for years and now we need to say learning how to learn. But it's not as if we have not been learning, but just a way to remind ourselves again about what many of us probably are already doing. Let's conclude with a prayer on page 3 of your books. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, fear, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.